in Chestnut Hill, there's a few names that have popped up that are no longer on the roster, and we really haven't addressed them on the show. Today, we're going to talk about who these players were and what they meant to this team.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. Thank you all who are listening, and thank you so much to those who have subscribed. Let's start kicking off with a little football talk. As BC continues their spring practice as they head to their April 15th spring game for the Jay McGillis spring game for football. Now, we've been talking about the team, how things have been going, what we know. And as I've said before, folks have been asking about updates on spring practice. Well, the football team, as I said during fall practice, they don't give you a whole lot in terms of the media. They've let the Gridiron Club watch more, probably, than what we've been able to watch. So there's not much in terms of what I can tell you in terms of that stuff. But I have failed, and I will take my lumps for this, to not talk about three real players that folks were wondering about that are no longer on the roster. And let's get into those. The first name that is gone is Finn Durstein, who officially announced that he's in the transfer portal. I believe they announced it last week, but he hasn't been on the roster, so it wasn't like a huge surprise. Now, Durstein is a local kid. He went to Lawrence Academy. He's been on the roster, I think, for 5 years, and really never found his footing here. He was a 4-star recruit. This was a big deal when Steve Addazio landed him. But he just never was able to stay healthy enough to stay on the field, and that even included last year. Now, Durstein was supposed to be the guard, like one of the veteran guards that was supposed to help that offensive line last year. And he played, I think it was the first 3 or 4 games, and then he was gone. And that was it. And so when I saw his name no longer listed on the roster, I was like, that makes sense. Especially when they brought in Kyle Hergel from Texas State, and you saw that Christian Mahogany was coming back. It kind of limited what Durstein could do. Now, he could have stayed and been a backup. He could have stayed and hoped that he wins a position battle against Hergel. That could have happened, but I guess he just decided to go on and try something else. So he's been out there trying to find a new home. And according to some Twitter accounts I saw, the options that he has were not ones that surprised me at all. And that is UMass, UConn, URI, and Maine. I figured he'd stay local because they probably have seen his tape. And no offense, he's not a kid that is going to go and get Power 5 offers from Power 5 schools yet. I mean, he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy enough. They're not going to use a scholarship on him. So I think those are a good spots. And honestly, I think it's going to be a good fit for Durstein, right? Like, if he can stay healthy enough, it'd be great to see him be successful at a UMass or URI. I don't want to see any BC guys on UConn, but that's one name. The biggest name that is no longer on the roster is Jalen Gill. Jalen Gill, wide receiver who transferred over from Ohio State when Hafley got here, is one of the guys that this was the one that was most shocking to me. And the reason why I was most shocked about this one was because I just projected him to be part of this roster. Like, I projected Gill to be one of the top wide receivers. I thought it would go Ryan O'Keefe, the transfer from UCF, Griffin, the Joseph Griffin, and then Jalen Gill. So to see him gone, it was a bit of a surprise. Now, Gill has had his flashes. I have to say he was underused here at BC. You were hoping you would see him become more explosive. He was almost a 5-star recruit, and he was a running back out of high school. He comes to BC, and he showed. I think back to that Clemson game, and in 2020, and he had like some really big catches. But there were times where he just vanished too. And I know last year he was hit with some injury stuff too. So he's gone. And now what does that mean for BC? For BC, that means a Dino Tomlin or a Lewis Bond is going to have to step up. Those are younger guys. And believe me, I think Dino Tomlin is very capable, and I loved what I've seen out of Lewis Bond. It's just been in limited catches, and Jaden Williams as well. Those three guys are going to have a chance. So is this a case where, it's a numbers crunch and he's a grad student who already has his degree? I saw his pictures on Instagram with him with his cap and gown. We don't know. But it's probably the biggest. I think Jalen Gill is the biggest name that is no longer on this roster. And then the third name, and this one is not a slight. It was just a name that I feel like has just kind of slid down the depth chart, and it just made sense. It's Spencer Witter. Spencer Witter, a tight end. In 2021, you saw him play more with Trey Berry. He was more the second and third tight end. Last year, he was hurt all the time, and he just vanished. He slid down that depth chart. It just made sense it's going to happen because you have George Takis coming back. You have Jeremiah Franklin, and then you have kids that are waiting to play, guys like Charlie Gordonier and Matthew Regan, and there's other guys in that tight end room that are desperate to get out there and play more. And you just knew, like, it just seemed like it was that time. There's certain times when you get on this roster in college football and you can kind of just feel like, they got their degree, they've played a little bit, it's time to move on. It's time to find something else. And for Witter, it seemed like that. It's not a knock on him at all. It just seemed like a natural move to have him go someplace else. And that'll do it. And I think a lot of this in college football, I think it's clear that BC has a specific philosophy, and I think a lot of schools have this, and I think it's actually NCAA regulations. The kids, once they sign their deal, they should be able to finish their degree at the school that they go to. Once BC, I mean, that's 3-4 years, depending on how the kids do it. Once it's done, it's now a business decision, right? It's a business, like college football is a business. So guys like Witter, guys like Gill, they are done. And so then after that, it's like, does Halfling have them, or does he need to think about the roster in the depth of what he has and what guys need to move up before they lose them to the transfer portal? So it's a tough spot. But I think all three guys, they had their moments at BC, but it's time for BC to move on from that, right? So in a moment, let's talk about more guys on the move. We're going to get into TJ Bickerstaff, a forward for BC who is now into the transfer portal himself. And we'll talk about what that means for BC and is this a big deal or not? We'll get into that in just a moment. But the tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/and sign to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which teams will be cutting down the net, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Locked on BC, AJ Black here, and we are talking about transfer portal news. So we talked about football in that first segment. Now let's get into basketball. Now, last Friday, Boston College lost guard DeMarr Langford to the transfer portal. Not a totally surprising move, but the former 4-star decided he's going to be looking for a new home, and he's going to be joined by one of his teammates, TJ Bickerstaff, who on Tuesday announced that he is going to be entering the transfer portal. Now, Bickerstaff, this is going to be his third home, which for many may seem weird for, if you back in the older days of college basketball where you had one team and you maybe transferred once. But now in the world of college basketball, 3 transfers doesn't seem all that weird. Jarris Hamilton, who was a 4-star that under Jim Christian, I think he ended up at 4 schools. There's it's just a lot of movement. Now, Bickerstaff came to BC in 2021 with Earl Grant. And when Earl Grant was first hired, he brought in Bickerstaff and he brought in Quentin Post as transfers, along with Jaden Zachary, Kanye Jones, and Kamari Williams as freshmen. Now, many of those guys are gone. Now, Bickerstaff is back on the move. Bickerstaff started his career with Drexel, the Drexel Dragons. I had to look up what their team name was because I honestly didn't have a clue. And what did Bickerstaff bring? Well, Bickerstaff, his first year, averaged 25 points. Not points. I said that and I got ripped on Twitter. I meant 25 minutes per game his freshman year, playing kind of that 3 or 4, depending on who he was out there with, along with James Karnick and Quentin Post. He was probably the best rebounder on the team. Pretty solid interior defender. Offensively, yeah, let's leave that off. He was not much on the offensive side of the ball. Looking at the picture that we have up on the YouTube channel, and if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that right now. Locked On BC. Heart palpitations watching him dribble the ball. He was not good enough. He was a liability. His first year in BC last year, he averaged 7 points per. I think it was 7 points per game. This year, his numbers all went down. Now, there's some reasons why that happened. He played more in the out-of-conference games when Quentin Post was out. But it looked clear to me that BC was much more comfortable going with a 4 and 5 of Devin McLaughlin and Quentin Post. So Bickerstaff saw his numbers dwindle, his statistics dwindled. And he was still a very valuable player off of the bench, but he was not a guy I would say on that team that was like invaluable or super key. And honestly, when he was out there, BC had issues on offense and he wasn't doing much to help. Like there was many issues with that offense at times. But you needed guys out there that could score. Bickerstaff was a liability. He just could not score. He couldn't shoot. So that was an issue. Again, though, tough defender, good rebounder. So he had his pluses and minuses. He wasn't a perfect player, but he did what he needed to do. And I thought he was solid at times. Now and DeMarr Langford's gone. So what does this mean to BC? Now BC has 3 roster spots that they can fill. So Earl Grant has some chances to fix. And I would say his offense that was near the bottom of the country, it got much better when Quentin Post came back. But he has some chance to get some shooters out there. And now we have talked about in previous episode, Coasy Reeves from Florida, who has an official visit set. We also see Claudel, and I already forget his name, Claudel Harris from Charleston Southern. He's going to set an official visit. And then Elijah Powell, who could be the replacement for Bickerstaff. He is a power forward from South Carolina, the state. He's a class of 23 recruit who is going to take an official visit to BC on April 17th and 18th. He's a former Wofford commit who decommitted and is looking at some schools. BC's in on heavy. And I believe they have a Zoom call with this kid tonight. So he could be someone to watch for as well. But this is a chance for BC to fix what they need to fix, right? You're going to get Quentin Post, Jaden Zachary, and you're hoping some of your younger guys develop next year to go along. And hopefully Devin McLaughlin becomes more of a everyday player to go with them. You need a good bench to go and become an NCAA team, right? You need guys. You can't just get your starters out there and just watch your game fall apart every week. This is a chance that Earl Grant can go out there into the transfer portal and get some guys that can play defense, but also be scorers. So, I've heard Joe Girard's name thrown around. First of all, he's going to get tons of top level offers out there from like blue bloods. Second of all, I don't think he could fit in this defense. He's played zone defense for 4 years straight at Syracuse. You're going to ask him to play man up. I think it'd be a mess. I don't think he'd be a good fit. But you have a chance to go out there and find guys that do fit. And whether that's Claudel Harris or Kawasi Reeves or other guys like Jordan Minor from Merrimack. That's another name folks have been asking me about. And believe me, I'm looking into it. He's quiet, and transfer portal news in football and basketball is a lot weirder than college recruiting. Recruiting, I can get, names and talk to kids and coaches. They all want to talk. Transfers don't. And they talk to the national guys. So on 247, you'll get reports. A lot of them are coming from the national guys. But I have not been able to get a handle on Jordan Minor because I think he's a power forward just like Bickerstaff, who would be great here. And the Georgia Tech site on 247 has been talking very highly about how BC is going to land him. I have not heard the same thing, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, in terms of other basketball news, I want to address the monkey in the room because it's been like a thing on Twitter for folks that have been asking me. And I want to be completely honest with you. Every time I've been tweeting about things, people have been asking me about Joanna McNamee and what's going on. What's going on with these transfers? What's going on with why are they doing this? AJ, look into this. And I want to be crystal clear. I don't cover women's basketball, and it's not a knock on the sport. I am one guy. I cover recruiting, football, and basketball on my own, with Mitch doing some reports here and there in his analysis. I cannot cover women's basketball, and I have zero sources with them. So I don't have the ability to go and look into this, nor do I really, honestly, it's not something that interests me. I'm going to be frank with you. There's other sites. I know BC Interruption's big into women's basketball. Maybe they'll do it, but it's not my thing. So I'm just going to say it right now. I'm not going to look into the Joanna McNamee stuff because it's not my scoop. It's not my lane. So thank you for asking me and asking why, for someone. And believe me, I'm interested too, but I don't have anywhere to go with this. So I'm not going to look into it. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, in our final segment, let's get into baseball, who had another big win on Tuesday in a midweek game against the UConn Huskies. We'll get into that in just a moment. This is Locked On BC. AJ Black. BC baseball has been the story of the spring, and it's going to be the biggest surprise of BC athletics in a long time because they won their 8th ranked game of the year, knocking out number 20 UConn 6-3 on Tuesday evening. They are now 18-5 with their second straight top 25 win. BC did everything again. So this was some really clutch pitching in this game that got them out of some really tough situations. We saw BC UConn hit into a pair of double plays. BC had 5 guys score runs again. And what was impressive about BC in this game was that these midweek games, you don't usually go with like your go-to pitchers. You go with, a spot starter or just run your bullpen out there and have guys go 2 innings each. And BC was still able to go on the road in Stores and win this game. UConn beat, I think it was last year, they beat BC pretty handily. So for BC to go out there and win again was big news. This team, I'm telling you, every game it's like, oh, wow. It's a wild thing, right? So AJ Colarasso, he earned the win of the year, striking out 2 over 3 innings. And then there were 3 stolen bases in this game, with Barry Walsh, Travis Honeymoon, and Cameron Larry getting steals. I mean, folks, let's strap in. This is going to be fun. It's been, I've done this podcast. What am I on? Like almost 600 episodes. 600 episodes about Boston college sports. I need to get my head checked. I really do. But once men's basketball and hockey ends, usually my podcast is like, okay, ready for summer football, I guess, and roster stuff. I don't know. But we got baseball now for 2 months, and BC is like, they're in this. Get ready for ACC tournament action, possibly playing for. I mean, UVA and Wake Forest are playing at a whole other level right now. But let's get ready for BC to contend. I mean, is that where we're at right now? They're almost already in the talk for NCAA tournament time. We're just 1 year away from everyone, myself including, wondering why Mike Gambino was still, you know, brought back as BC's head coach. It was some miserable baseball the last couple of years. And they won what, 19 games last year total. They're 18-5 right now. BC baseball is no longer a joke. Folks are starting to watch this team and go. I had my Louisville friend, Matt McGavick, who covers them for Fan Nation, saying, he sent me a message. He goes, "What's up with BC this year?" And they're not playing the best baseball in the world. Believe me, their hitting is not. There's indicators that their hitting might plummet, but they're just doing what their stats be damned. They're doing what they need to do to win. And now they have another series at home this weekend against a ranked team, Tech. They have 3 games beginning Friday at home. All games are going to be on ACC Network. So be prepared. Get ready to watch this. Give BC baseball some credit because it's been a while other than women's lacrosse since we've had a very successful team on BC. Women's basketball had a little piece here, and BC hockey has been, kind of hit or miss for about 5-6 years now. BC baseball is at a whole other level. Let's wait and see what happens. So this is going to wrap up today's show. We'll be back again tomorrow. I apologize. I did not get to the comments into today's comment section, but thank you to everybody who listened to today's show. And thank you all. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC. I promise you, I will get to comments again tomorrow. It was just a busy day, but we'll be back again soon. Thank you all. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button and like this podcast right now. It does